So that is actually like a perfect segue over to a question here from somebody in the audience, Bill Holstein, who's asking, now that the Times has developed this visual forensic team, how do you coordinate with the news desks that have traditionally dominated the paper's coverage of the world and the nation, of course? Do you coordinate? Do you work with the foreign desk on this project? Did you work with any of the Times correspondents in the region?
We, on this particular project, for the main pieces in it, we didn't work. We led the reporting on that and the production of those stories, and of course we lean on our colleagues in the newsroom in Beirut, in Turkey, whenever we needed to, and they're extremely collegial and helpful. And then there are other projects where we do team up. An investigation into an attack on protesters by the military in Nigeria. Dion Sarsi teamed up with us and a reporter that she was working with on a freelance basis, Emmanuel Akinwotu, and he went there with a camera crew to the location. So that was one. The Khashoggi stuff, we teamed up with Ben Hubbard and David Kirkpatrick. And yeah, so story by story, sometimes we'll team up. Today, we produced a reconstruct of what happened in Washington, D.C. last week in conjunction with the graphics desk. It's more of an interactive than a video. But what we really wanted to do was build that specialist reporting ability within our team, along with all of the really talented story producers, video editors, motion graphics editors that are on the team as well.
It's also about like teaching other people like what you're doing, and in some ways like maybe spreading those skills or like that way of thinking in terms of reporting.
Yeah, in some ways, and some reporters on different desks are really adept at that. Like I think of Megan Specia, she's great at that and has a keen eye for opportunities like that. And she's on the foreign desk. She's in London at the moment, and so she often leads those types of stories independently in print.
Great. I have two more questions just coming up on time here, but the Breonna Taylor reconstruction, the shooting of Breonna Taylor, was a remarkable piece of work. Can you talk a little bit about that and what went into that and sort of the fallout from that?
Yes. So the idea behind this came when obviously Breonna Taylor was killed during a botched raid by the police on her apartment last March. Really high profile story, and controversial because of how the police approached what happened, the charges that they brought against her boyfriend at the time, but also that they didn't wear or they didn't use body cameras. In fact, two of the officers, one of them had a body cam, the other was rigged to wear a body cam, but none of the others were even rigged. So there's no video evidence of what happened, and so it was sort of very much a he said she said type of a scenario between the boyfriend who was inside, who's a survivor, and the cops on the outside. And at issue here was like, how did this go so wrong, and how did it escalate so quickly? And what was shock. So anyway, so there was that. So we had little to work with until we got access to a trove of photographs, crime scene photographs, floor plans and other stuff. And it was really shocking to see just how many bullets they fired so quickly that riddled almost every room in her apartment. And so the question was like, how the hell could this happen? And what happened, really? And even though there were no cameras there, the holes in walls and ceilings and through walls and into other walls and through windows into walls and into everyday household objects allowed us to retrace the trajectories of those bullets and put, officers in certain places. And then also some of the officers were interviewed immediately after, some in the days or weeks after, who were involved, their testimony also, and the testimony of the boyfriend who was inside as well, allowed us to, do the job that the body cameras would have done and basically recreate what happened and the screw ups along the way as we investigated it as well. I should say that there's great reporting by our Times colleagues, but also the Louisville Courier Journal, who've been on this case from the beginning. And, you know, Vice News have also done really good work incrementally on this. But we wanted to sort of like visualize it, because anybody I spoke to about it, they still didn't really fully understand, you know, what had happened, and was there a drug dealing boyfriend who was in there? Didn't he fire at the cops, and wasn't there a firefight and things like that? So that was the impetus for it, to try to recreate it. And I think a lot of people appreciated it. They kind of felt like that it really explained visually what went down, and left an indelible sort of impression upon them. So that was it. And then in our analysis, you know, you're looking at, there's one, so just again, going back to the story, they ram into her door after 45 seconds. Policeman steps into the breach. The apartment is entirely dark. At this stage, Brianna and her boyfriend are walking towards the door. And because the police, they didn't know it was the police, and they think an intruder is trying to ram in the door, he grabs his handgun and he shoots down and shoots one of the cops in the leg. And what we're trying to do in the reconstruction is simulate that environment, and you can do that with 3D modeling. And you know, where if you put the ceiling on, you can see how dark it is inside there, and the fact that the cops are silhouetted. The only light is behind them. They're not using flash lamps, any of that. So a cop gets hit in the leg, he returns fire, takes cover, returns 2 more rounds, and then takes cover again and gets out of there. But meanwhile, another of his colleagues steps in and then just sprays the place and stops only when his weapon stops him from firing. And he's the guy who fired the fatal shots. And then another police officer runs to the front and fires 10 rounds in through 2 windows, and he can't see through the windows. He can't see who's behind the windows. And so just explaining all of that in sort of in 3D, I think was the goal.
Yeah, I mean, it was an extraordinary experience, because even if you'd read all the coverage, like really being in the room and seeing and being in the space, I think was you got a very different understanding of what had happened, and how irresponsibly the cops had at best had behaved really irresponsibly. And part of it, right? Like the next day, or there was like, you know, the next day.
Oh yeah.
After the piece came out.
That's right. I mean, like listening to the testimony, the Attorney General, Daniel Cameron, at the time, the charges were levied against the officer who fired from the front through the windows, but not against the officers who fired into the hallway where Brianna was. He said that they were justified in their use of force. But, you know, in talking to legal experts and former police officers, and even, you know, the SWAT commander, listening to his testimony, SWAT commander who arrived after the fact, it's far more complicated than that. That if there are intelligence failures in your preparation for it, if you're told you shouldn't execute that search warrant without the SWAT team, and you shouldn't be doing simultaneous warrants, but yet you'd go ahead and do it, that you don't clearly announce yourself that you're police there when you're breaking in somebody's door. And then the fact that one of the 2 officers who were firing into the door does so blindly, and he, in his own words, says he couldn't hear anything, he couldn't see anything, and if you told me I didn't fire my weapon, I'd believe you. And he fires 16 rounds in seconds in there, and he's the guy who kills her. That seems to us to be excessive use of force, and that was what we were trying to convey. And the following day, the new police chief agreed with that assessment and sent a letter of termination to that officer. And so that was the first time the police department kind of fessed up, saying, yeah, this is a monumental screw up in terms of her death. You know.